Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the advisory chart here, all we got left is the winter weather advisory for the eastern Arctic coast out through 6 p.m. tomorrow. East winds 30 to 40, snow and blowing, so east winds 30 to 40 miles per hour with snow and blowing snow, reducing visibility to a half mile at times tonight through Monday. And onto the satellite imagery, a lot of sunshine here over the much of the state, really. Just some clouds up here over the northwest, mostly clear on the north slope, but areas of clouds and fog along the Arctic coast here, kind of coming down through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Of course, lots of clouds out over the Bering Sea. Have this upper level low here kind of swinging back to the southwest there with a band hanging in right over St. Paul Island. All the clearing off to the southeast with the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. There's some isolated showers today. Rain falling Kodiak Island much of the day today, and some moisture working into Bristol Bay. And we've got clouds south of the Kenai Peninsula. Pretty nice day here along the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. Dry conditions. And then a front spreading northward, bringing some areas of light rain at times, not much of a rain producer, and a little breezy as well, especially over the southern panhandle earlier on, but breaking out down there, just some isolated showers with the heaviest wind and rain with the main low center here occurring across the Queen Charlotte Islands. And for today on the chart, here's that front, bringing a little bit of moisture up to the north with Ketchikan picking up about 1/4 of an inch of precipitation, as well as Wrangell. Otherwise, Annette and Klawock, or Heidelberg, Annette and Heidelberg had about 1/10 of an inch of precipitation. Klawock had 2/10 of an inch. And again, you see the clearing here along the North Gulf Coast. All of really interior Alaska pretty good. Rain Kodiak Island, Aleutian Range kind of cutting that off, so just some shower activity with mostly cloudy skies or Bristol Bay. A little more clearing here over the southeast Bering. And snow showers, breezy conditions from Adak Island out towards Shemya, and areas of fog here, along with some low clouds and even isolated flurries along the Arctic coast, with better conditions here, but still some low visibilities, gusty winds, Tin City north 40 miles per hour today, 15 to 25 mile per hour in the winds, maybe some gusts 35 there for St. Lawrence Island, but conditions have improved. And for tonight, I'll stay about status quo through there, and really no change along the Arctic coast as well, or the interior. Still maybe some clouds and flurries there from that Tok area, maybe up to Eagle, but nothing significant. And the rain for Kodiak becomes more of a showery condition this evening and overnight tonight. A little bit of moisture may reach the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula. The Kenai Peninsula. Looks clear up there for the southern Seward Peninsula, or some at least dry conditions with partly to mostly cloudy skies. Otherwise, staying dry with light winds for the North Gulf Coast. And in that trough, probably will kick off a few showers over the northern panhandle later on this evening and tonight, followed by a break, and then some more stuff slipping northward there into the southern areas with gusty winds and a chance of rain. For tomorrow, that low continues to weaken and pull northwestward just off the coast. So that's going to keep the southern half of the panhandle cloudy, rainy, and breezy, while the northern half should stay dry, but still probably cloudy to mostly cloudy conditions. Then we have a trough lifting northward with that moisture. Will increase the shower chances mostly west of Cordova, south of Valdez, and then on in towards Whittier. And then back down along the southern Kenai Peninsula into the Barren Islands, mostly now over for Kodiak Island, except maybe on the Shelikof Strait side of things. Areas of light snow and showers there, northeast Bristol Bay, extending back across Kuskokwim Bay out toward the Pribilofs. More snow showers for the eastern Aleutians, just isolated to scattered for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. A little more numerous, but not much there for the central Aleutians. Still looking at those chilly north winds and breezy, scattered, isolated light snow, St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, but areas partly to mostly sunny here through just about all of interior Alaska, the Sitna Valley, all the way up to the Arctic coast. And maybe a little less breezy than what you saw today here through areas of the central and eastern interior, where winds were 10 to 20, gusts 25 miles per hour in some locations, especially the higher elevations, and even a less of a gradient for the area up there on Tuesday. And should be quite nice, but still holding on to those easterly winds along the coast at 30 knots there, with lighter conditions back to the northwest, and no change for the Bering Strait except continuing to slowly diminish those winds down now under brisk wind advisory levels through this area for Tuesday. And snow showers still pretty numerous, mostly prevalent around the Pribilof Islands and becoming more isolated and scattered again here for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, but there's still a chance. And Kodiak Island, just a risk of some shower conditions, mostly along western Cook Inlet. Look for a little bit more in the way of clouds and showery conditions here, Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, and maybe some showers also breaking out along the Alaska Range, and then mostly cloudy over the central interior with possibly a few flurries, but probably not. And then the next front bringing more wind and rain into the southeast coast, with the rain mostly over the southern areas there, especially Prince of Wales Island, probably spreading up to include Sitka during the afternoon hours, but gale force winds of 35 to 40 knots in the forecast for Monday there for the entire stretch of the coastline, with small craft advisories over the inside waters. Temperatures down that way today were in the mid to upper 40s. 52 at Hoona was a warm spot in the state today, and otherwise 45 in Juneau with a 47-degree temperature recorded at Yakutat, 43 in Cordova, back up to 47 at Seward, 38 in Kodiak with the rain, 40 in Homer, 41 Kenai, back down to 40 there for Palmer, and Talkeetna at 39 degrees, while Golconda was in the mid-20s. Same thing for Northway, upper 20s for Fairbanks, and quite a bit cooler out to the west. Tanana just 18 by comparison, 12 at Fort Yukon, 21 Bettles, and pretty chilly on the north slope with Umiat Airfield at -12 this afternoon, and generally below zero along the Arctic coast with the exception of Kaktovik, which pushed up to 3 above, and single numbers mostly there for the northwest, 4 at Kotzebue, -3 at Deering, 0 at Tin City, 3 at Savunga, upper teens for the southern Kenai, or the southern Seward Peninsula, and teens down over the Yukon and the deltas, but quite a bit warmer there at Bethel by comparison, 28 degrees, 21 in McGrath, into the 30s down across Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s and 30s for the Pribilofs, and 30s dropping into the upper 20s out over the western Aleutians. For lows tonight, not much change, 20s and 30s out that way, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, a little below zero, St. Lawrence Island, further below zero up over the north slope. Again, some areas could drop down to -20, otherwise in that 0 to 10 below range through this area, and right around zero here through the Tanana Valley. Some areas could drop below zero. Golconda, for example, might reach 1 below. Otherwise, teens and 20s, south central Alaska, 30s Kodiak Island, and the southeast coast. Highs tomorrow, 40s again for the Panhandle, lower 40s Kodiak Island, Seldovia and Homer, 30s to the north, and upper 20s Copper River Basin, teens to lower 20s Tanana Valley, and a day much like today up over the north slope in the Arctic coast, back down to St. Lawrence Island, below zero, 30 degrees a high for St. Paul, 32 for Shemya, and 35 for Unalaska. For the flying weather conditions, VFR north could start a little marginal up here with some showers lingering tomorrow morning, and then becoming VFR by late morning as more marginal stuff spreads into the south. IFR from Montague Island down through the Barrens into Kachemak Bay, mostly north of Kodiak Island. IFR also over the northern Bering Sea through the Strait, and then wrapping up and along the Arctic coast. Anaktuvik, look for VFR tomorrow and also for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, maybe some marginal VFR on the eastern entrances. Otherwise, a VFR kind of day. No problems for rainy. Good VFR there, as well as windy. Isabel and Mentasta. Tanita, same forecast, VFR. Portage, any obstructions to visibilities and ceilings or lower ceilings will be on the eastern entrance. I think it'll stay VFR on the west side, maybe. Chilkoot and White, marginal to start with, as I mentioned, then becoming VFR during the morning. And for the freezing levels at the surface, right along the Aleutians here, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, and then just, well, north of most of the Panhandle, late tonight, early tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet in over the Gulf of Alaska to Fognak Island. And with the moisture coming northward, look for some icing here, 3,000 to 16,000 feet over the southern southeast coast. And then that leftover moisture, actually the trough will lift northward, so look for a possibility of some areas of light to isolated moderate rime or mixed icing here, Gulf of Alaska, maybe spreading into Prince William Sound, then back out to the west like this. And for the upper wind flow, we've got, again, that upper trough continue to slide a little bit to the south there, now south of the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow afternoon. Jet well to the south, splits in this area, weaker branch out of the south coming up at about 40 knots. So really at this level, light wind flow at 33,000 feet. And really not that much higher at 9,000 feet over the interior. Easterlies 5 to 15, but up to 45 knots just off the Arctic coast. And light winds for the Panhandle, strongest winds will be down south or east of this low center as it weakens and pulls northwestward. And then we've got northeasterlies 15 to 30 knots out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. 3,000 feet, weak low here, pulling over Bristol Bay. Could see some 30-knot winds out of the east through the interior. Otherwise 20 along the eastern Alaska range. Really light south central Alaska and the North Gulf Coast. 20 knots for the Panhandle. Northerlies 30 to 35 out in the Aleutians. And the turbulence forecast here, all below 5,000 feet, southeast coast. Areas of light to isolated moderate chop up over the central and eastern interior. A little more extensive here along the eastern Arctic coast. And then where the breezes are there from St. Lawrence Island up to about Point Lay, and then maybe out here over the western Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back to look at the marine forecasts.
You watch a good route finder, and it's like poetry in motion. You watch how they do it. They'll go along and always choosing the gentlest terrain. That's the #1 rule. Always stay on the gentlest terrain possible. For example, they're going up a ridge and they'll be doing switchbacks back and forth on the ridge, and they won't get too far off on the sides of the ridges where the slope angle gets too steep. They'll put in more switchbacks than maybe somebody else who is less of an artist might. If they have to cross a slope, they'll cross it as high on the avalanche path as they can, because if it breaks, then they're right near the crown and they have a chance of getting off of it. If they are choosing between two different slopes, they'll choose the one with the most anchors in them. They'll choose ones where if it does slide, the consequences of the slide isn't nearly as bad.
If I go into a new area, I always tone it down right away. I don't just do it like I do at home. I dig a few snow pits, I test some slopes that are low angle, and then I build my way up. And it might take 1 or 2 days worth of skiing to really feel comfortable in that kind of environment. I usually start out low angle, 30, 35 degrees, and try to work my way up. And you sort of sniff it out. You can't just jump on the first 50-degree slope when you don't even know the snowpack.
I believe ski cutting is one of the more valuable tools that we use in guiding. In a ski cut, you generally start out on top of the run in a point of safety, and you find or you eyeball a place across the hill that you can ski to. And you want to keep your speed up, and at the same time you're down weighting on your skis as you go across the slope. But your main goal is to keep your speed up so that you do not get caught if you should cut off a small slope. In fact, I can't remember a time where the lead guide does not ski cut the slope 3 or 4 times, starting at the very top. And there has been, you know, quite a few times when I wiped my brow and said, oh, I'm glad we ski cut this run.
If it's really big, I'll have a rope. I'll be tied, light rope, 8mm, something like that, tie it to a tree. And if you're really going to get serious, you should always carry a rope. And I'll just do 2 or 3 test turns real gingerly, and then work my way into the run like that, instead of the all-out attack like you see in the movies. You don't attack a slope that you haven't been on.
Spooning in tracks is one thing that's getting increasingly important. If you approach the slope with kind of the minefield approach, if there's avalanches out there, maybe the first person down didn't trigger any potential problems, and you might as well stay real close to their tracks rather than wandering all over the slope. If you're wandering all over the slope, you have a better chance of finding that mine and triggering that slope.
What seems to have happened in some of our larger snowmobile-triggered avalanches, at least in this area, are one or more snowmobilers, usually two snowmobilers, will get up on a slope and they'll get their machines stuck. And then it seems that the avalanches have been releasing while these folks have been off of their machines and trying to pull their machines around. Now, when you have two people on the same slope and they've each got a 500-pound snow machine, we're talking about putting a lot of load on one slope.
When conditions are very dangerous and you can't travel to a safer place, the best choice is often to dig a snow cave or use the protection of a crevasse and wait for conditions to improve.
We use ice caves all the time in the big mountains because you don't know what's above you and how much snow, and it's better to be in a bomb shelter.
Choosing a route and choosing the safest techniques for traveling on that route are no different than any other aspect of avalanches in that there are no rules of thumb. Where you go and how you do it depend on the stability of the snowpack. We can think of the snowpack stability as three different categories analogous to a traffic light: red light, yellow light, and green light. During red light conditions, the snowpack is very unstable. You may see recent avalanche activity, collapsing and cracking of the snow, and most of your snow pit tests may indicate unstable snow. In red light conditions, your route finding choices become very limited. You can only travel on gentle terrain, on slopes of about 30 degrees or less, and stay out from underneath avalanche starting zones. Often, the only way you can venture onto steeper terrain is if you're in thick trees. You should also travel only with other people who have good avalanche skills. During yellow light conditions, some slopes are very safe, while others are very dangerous. For instance, just after a windstorm, wind-scoured slopes are usually safe, but wind-loaded slopes are very dangerous. Interestingly enough, this is when most avalanche accidents occur, because people without good avalanche skills can't tell the difference between safe and dangerous slopes, and they quickly get themselves into trouble. Finally, during green light conditions, the snowpack is mostly stable with only very isolated areas of avalanche hazard. This is usually the only kind of day when you can venture onto the more radical terrain and do it safely. But as always, only after careful evaluation. This may also be the only time to travel with larger groups of less skilled people. Unfortunately, knowing snow stability and safe travel skills isn't enough. In a disturbing percentage of avalanche accidents, although several obvious signs of instability were present, the victims either didn't notice the signs or chose to ignore them. Ultimately, most avalanche accidents come down to the human factor.
In Alaska, we've been investigating avalanche accidents. And what we found is that it's not usually 1 or 2 or 3 clues that are being overlooked. Usually by the time people are getting into trouble, it's 3 or 4 or 5 clues. Usually the problems are that people are picking up on the clues, but they're making decisions on human terms. In other words, it's a blue sky day, so we want to go skiing, or the skiing's been lousy and we finally had a dump, or this snow ranger said the avalanche hazard was moderate, or you paid $500 to fly into this spot to go skiing, so you're going to ski it. If you're going to ski or travel safely in the backcountry, you need to make your decisions on Mother Nature's terms. We go out there with skiers' eyeballs or snow machiners' eyeballs, and we need to go out there with avalanche eyeballs.
Other perception traps that you can fall into is that you just believe that things are safe. Maybe things are dangerous there, but if you believe that they're safe, you're not going to see it. That's the nature of perception, and that's why it's really important to keep an open mind all the time.
It's real common that if someone's killed on a particular slope, that people will avoid that slope like the plague for years and years afterwards. They'll talk about that slope like it's, you know, a place of certain death. Well, at the same time, people are out skiing nearly identical slopes, just as dangerous slopes, in a dangerous way. And they're not making their decisions based on fact, they're making their decisions based on feelings.
I mean, I know people who basically on the summit day says, nothing will stop us, the weather's good. And so only fatigue will make me turn around. So they actually shut out the idea of being able to retreat due to snow conditions. If you shut that out, then it's certainly not a nagging problem in the back of your mind until the moment you hear that whoomph and you're riding one down the mountainside.
The big factor in the Alaska range, as in a lot of big mountains, the key is to hurry up and wait. In big mountains, you cannot afford to be under a rush schedule. You've got to be relaxed. You got to be willing to hang out in the tent. If it doesn't feel right for you, you stay in the tent. You know, you just can't say, well, I'm going to miss my meeting on Monday. Well, you're just going to have to miss your meeting on Monday.
Group dynamics is certainly an important part of avalanche avoidance. And the most important element of group dynamics is communication. Been on too many tours where someone didn't feel right about the snow, but they didn't say anything about it, and they felt they were getting in over their heads, or they felt the snow was more unstable, but they didn't feel comfortable talking about it. And those, to me, are the most dangerous situations where there's no communication between the individual members of a party.
Something happens when you put a lot of people together. As soon as there's 5 people, you're much more willing to go into places that you normally wouldn't go. You add 10 people, and it's like you'll go anywhere. And this herding instinct is very important, the safety in numbers kind of thing. But it's a false sense of security because the avalanches think just the opposite of that. You might feel safer with 10 people, but the avalanche feels that it's just 10 times more weight on its back, 10 times more people trying to trip the trigger on the big buffalo trap that's going to bury everybody.
I think the problem with us outdoorists in the West is that we're gear freaks. We actually think things protect us from the elements, when in fact, if you don't know how to use the stuff, then it doesn't at all. It just leads you into this false sense of security. And it's more important to have skills and knowledge, and then you can use your equipment. But you have to base yourself on knowledge first, equipment after, not equipment first, knowledge after.
There really has to be a lack of cockiness when you're out there. My attitude with avalanches is that they are all-powerful. I have complete respect for the snow and the snowpack, and I take no risks without assessing all variables.
Welcome back. We're looking for south winds, 30 knots here on the extreme south coast. Easterlies diminishing down to 15 as you head north. And then pretty good gales to start the day with there for Clarence Strait at 40 knots, diminishing throughout the afternoon. Small craft advisories here for the central and northern inside waters with the strongest winds in northern Lynn Canal. Then for Tuesday, they'll swing around to the south at 20 knots, southeast 20 for Stevens Passage, and small craft advisories for Clarence Strait. And then we've got 40-knot winds all the way up to just about, well, covering just about all of the coast, but gales all along the coastline, east-southeasterlies, 11 to 15-foot seas. Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet, northeast 15, seas 3 feet. 20-knot winds down into Kamishak Bay, southwest 20 for Kodiak. Easterlies at 20 knots from the Barren Islands out across the North Gulf Coast. Light variable conditions for Shelikof Strait. Those become northeast 20 on Tuesday and northeast 15 from Kachemak Bay to northern Cook Inlet. Prince William Sound, easterlies, small craft variety there for the North Gulf Coast. Northeasterlies at 25, Barren Islands, and northeast up to 30 on the east side of Kodiak Island. Bristol Bay tomorrow, northwest at 10, southeast at 15 on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, east 15 to the south, back around to the west at 15 southwest of Kodiak Island. That's almost like a variable wind at 5 to 15 knot forecast to cover the whole area. And for Tuesday, pretty light winds from a northeasterly direction from Bristol Bay on down to Cape Sarachev, and then on the south side, northerlies become northeasterly at 20 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, variable to easterlies 10 to 15, and then small craft advisories, a little brisker on the north winds there for Adak and Atka, northwest 30 with 12-foot seas out to the west. And then for Tuesday, 20-25 knot winds west-northwest for the western Aleutians, and about the same but more northwesterly for the central areas. And for the Fox Islands, northwest, just 15 knots with 5-foot seas, so a couple of light wind days for there. And for the southwest coast, pretty light winds south of Nunivak Island with 20-knot winds to the north. Brisk wind advisories continue for St. Lawrence Island for one more day, as well as the Bering Strait, northeast 15 for the Pribilofs. And for Tuesday, still carry some 25-knot winds there for St. Matthew Island, and 15 to 20 knots north of Nunivak Island, northeast 15 to the south. Arctic coast, 30-knot winds on the east side, diminishing, becoming more northeasterly, but brisk wind advisories all the way down to Wales. And then for Tuesday, lightening up here on the west side, 15 to 20 knots, and easterlies at 20, but holding those 30-knot winds in the forecast there on the east side through Tuesday afternoon. And for tonight, dry over the interior with just some variable clouds, a little breezy in some areas, especially back here toward the east, and staying breezy through the Bering Strait. 30 to 40 mile an hour winds, snow and blowing snow, visibility is a half mile at times on the eastern Arctic coast, and rain becomes more showery. Some of those could become mixed with snow, especially at the higher elevations for Kodiak Island, and a chance of some snow in across northeast Bristol Bay, Kamishak Bay, maybe Iliamna. This area moisture begins to lift northward toward the Kenai Peninsula, while this band slips up with a chance of some moisture over the northern southeast coast, while the southern areas, another round comes into the south with a little bit of an increase in the winds as well. And that low continues to weaken and pull moisture northward, but keeping the southern coast in the rain chance area. The northern areas will be drier. No change over the interior, the Arctic coast, or out in the Bering Sea. The only change here, more clouds and the chance of showers up along the North Gulf Coast and the southern Kenai Peninsula, and back here with some snow. And for Tuesday, wind and rain begin to increase on the Panhandle. That's a look at the weather. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.